Okay, we're all familiar with Capcom, right? The company that for decades has given us dozens and dozens of amazing games for multiple genres. Their game library is enormous, so naturally a few games may have been overlooked. If you're like me, you grew up playing a lot of Capcom games here and there. For example, everyone is familiar with this guy, right? The iconic Blue Bomber. Mega Man's had many incarnations, but the one that my generation was most familiar with was Mega Man.exe, or more simply, the Mega Man Battle Network series. This video isn't about the Battle Network series, but it is very directly related to it. While the games were pretty popular, there were a lot of them to the point that, sales had dipped as time went on. Near the end of the Battle Network series, Capcom decided the best thing to do is to wipe the slate clean and start over. Here's a stellar series you're going to be glad you learned about. In 2006, Capcom released Mega Man Star Force. The series takes place 200 years or so after the original Battle Network series. Things get very dark very quickly. Our young protagonist is a boy named Geo Stellar. His father was a man named Kelvin. He was the head of a space program to find intelligent life and befriend them. The mission's a success, but things take a turn for the worse when the space station his father is on goes missing, and while a search was conducted to find them, it was ended after part of the station falls back onto Earth. Due to this, Geo's isolated himself from going to school or making friends his own age, in fear of losing more people he cares about. This has been going on for 3 years now. On our way to Geo's favorite spot, we run into a young girl named Luna Platts and her little peanut gallery. Currently, her life's purpose as a 5th grade class president is to get Geo to go back to school. He refuses. Geo spends his time learning about space, reading books, and missing his father. As we find him doing 2 of these 3 things, he's struck by what appears to be lightning. This leads to near-death experience number 1. The bolt of lightning that hit this 5th grader was actually an alien made of things called EM waves, who's named Omega, or Mega for short. Now's a good time to mention that pretty much the entire world is super high spec. Practically anything that has electricity in it is something that an EMP being like Omega or even a simple virus can affect. Cars, appliances, and even some things that don't make sense. Omega claims to know something about Geo's father and uses this information as leverage against Geo to allow him to fuse together so they can use Mega's powers. Apparently, FM beings aren't able to use their full power unless they fuse with a human while they're on Earth. The 2 wave change to become Mega Man. The bones of the Battle Network series do make it to this game, such as having a folder full of chips that you use as your skills to fight viruses and bosses, a ton of exploring in different areas, and some light puzzle solving elements. The biggest difference lies in the combat. 9x9 grid that you and your opponents each have. Geo only gets 3 squares of movement, the enemies get 3x5, Geo gets a shield where he can block attacks, and the entire perspective is now more third person than it is top down. Omega is also being hunted down by FM beings, but we don't know why just yet. While Geo clearly doesn't want to get involved in this fight, he will do it for any information he can get about his father. After solving our first problem, Mega forces us to commit our first crime and snoop in the pit boys of the local people. While he does try to play this off as curiosity for humans, he's actually making sure there are no other FMians like himself in the nearby area. And after a few instances of data breaching, Luna and her boys go for attempt number 2 to convince Geo to go to school. He refuses. When Luna's muscle tries to intimidate Geo into going to school, Omega gets irritated and causes Geo to punch Bud. Since being a meathead was Bud's only personality trait, he's pretty shaken when he fails at his only job. It doesn't help that Luna threatens to ditch him for not being useful to her. Damn. Just like my ex, FMians tend to be drawn in by people who have a void in their heart. It happens with Omega and Geo, and now it happens with Taurus and Bud. Geo gets a bad vibe, and Mega uses reverse psychology for us to find the source. Luna meets up with us and tells us that she's taken it upon herself to become the neighborhood watch, and then reminds us to go to school. Who put a 5th grader in charge of being the neighborhood watch, by the way? Taurus finds the opportunity to cause chaos and transforms Bud into Taurus Fire, takes control of Luna's hover bronco and tries to run Geo over. This is definitely near-death experience number 2. If that isn't bad enough, our hero decides to stop the rampaging truck by parking a car on the intersection. We immediately get near-death experience number 3. We enter the Bronco server system to confront Taurus. The gimmick here is to rodeo your way in to the depths of the system, where at the end the boss awaits us. I treated this area with respect it deserves, and we fight the boss. We learn that Mega has something called the Andromeda key, and that the king of the FMs wants it back. The first boss, Taurus, is pretty simple to fight against. I even got the S on my first try. If you haven't noticed already, the fusion of Geo and Mega doesn't actually have a name yet. Luna is rescued by them, so she asks them, "Hey, what is your name?" And Geo comes up with it on the fly, Mega Man. This mistakes and discusses this with Luna, and she gaslights her way through the conversation. During one of Geo's sessions of staring at the sky, we meet a flying man. Mr. Boreal, your dad's old co-worker, introduces him as his assistant, Tom Dubious. No, not that one. Since Aaron cares about Geo, he invites him to his workplace at NASA, to which Geo finds difficult to refuse. We also get a little scene of Aaron attempting to bond with Tom by forming a brother band together. In this world, brother bands seem to be a sign of great trust with the person you're forming it with. Tom has trust issues because he has difficulty forming bonds with other people. To make things worse, the only other person he's ever formed a brother band with ended up stealing blueprints for a design he made and took all the credit for himself. Naturally, all this attracts our next FMian, Cygnus. Geo arrives at Amaken while being followed by Luna and her boys. During the tour of his office, a misunderstanding occurred. Tom believes that Aaron is taking credit for his flat pack and decides to give in to Cygnus for his revenge. We head to a space simulation exhibit that's so accurate, there's not even oxygen in the room. No, that's not a joke either. Which leads us perfectly into near-death experience number 4. Tom becomes Cygnus Wing and hits an emote so addicting that whoever watches him is forced to do the dance as well, until they run out of oxygen and die. By now you might see the pattern, right? There isn't always too much to say about the dungeons, aside from the actual gimmicks, so in our case, there are floor pads to avoid and ducks to fry. Once we beat his ass and let Aaron finish the job, Tom believes people can't trust each other. He claims that he filled the room with oxygen. As unbelievable as that is, in a show of massive cojones, Aaron takes his helmet off because he fully believes Tom would never truly risk hurting anyone. The act of trust gives Tom the power to rebuke Cygnus from his soul. Another FMian down. Geo wakes up, a cop breaks into our house, we hit him with a baseball and erase incriminating evidence straight into felony number 2. Geo wakes up, a talent manager breaks into our house looking for a girl named Sonia. She asks us to help her find a place to hide from him. We ask literally the only competent adult we know in the game, Aaron, for help, and he says Sonia can stay in his office but has to return to her home as soon as possible. Sonia then tells us her heartbreaking story about her and her sick mother. The two of them bonded through Sonia's singing. She heavily associated singing and music to her mother, so she became a successful musician because of that passion, and then lost said passion to music when her mother sadly passed away, but her greedy manager continued to squeeze her talent for more profit for himself. The manager confronts us and punches an 11-year-old boy. He is now the main antagonist of our story. Sonia's emotions hit a breaking point, and a new FMian, Lyra, offers her an escape to the situation that she's in. The two merge to become Harpno, and rightfully, hey, they blast her manager with a gnarly shred and go on to attack her fans. Anyway, we confront her because Geo sympathizes with the pain she's going through because he's also lost a parent. Seeing Sonia overwhelmed by her emotions, Geo does the right thing and chases after her to help stop her. This is kind of the point where the backtracking in the game is starting to show. Most RPGs have taken to actually giving the player the option, hey, do you want to fight or do you want to just ignore the enemies? And I feel like there's a reason for that. The random encounter thing is kind of outdated, and this is one aspect of the game that's a little dated. I really do appreciate that the game gives us lore at a pretty good pace. I will vouch for the story though. If you do stick with some of the dated aspects of the gameplay, the story more than makes up for it as a reward. We learn that Omega wants to take revenge specifically on the FM King. We also get to hear Geo's own thoughts about his own issues, where he's afraid to get close to people and make new bonds because he's afraid of losing people he cares about. He doesn't like the pain that he feels from that. Damn. Lyra takes a liking to Sonia, so they stick together. Moved by his words, Sonia decides to go for a clean slate. Still in the early stages of grief, she begins to cry. Geo remembers the lesson that his father taught him, and so he decides to support Sonia by asking to form a brother band with her, something that neither of them had ever had up until this point. And what better way to kick off your new friendship than by committing felony number 3? If you guys are enjoying the video so far, please let me know because there's a lot more to come. So now that Geo is beginning to open his heart to forming bonds, he speaks to the 3 legendary Pokemon that are the satellite admins that connect the world using EM waves. But enough of that for now. Geo wakes up and wants to ask Aaron more about his father. Luna wakes up and wants to ask Geo when he'll go to school. He refuses. To get her off his back, he does agree to see the stage of the school play that's being directed by Luna. In her victory at getting Geo to come to the school, she is humble and graceful. We meet the cool teacher, Mr. Shepard, who clearly cares about his students. We have yet another near death on the stage lights dropped directly above Geo. I'm actually not allowed to defeat the culprit, so instead we kinda just hug it out. This definitely counts as another near death. We make contact with those giant Aemians, and we learn that Planet FM actually destroyed Planet AM, which is where these 3 giant guys are from. Even though Omega is an Femian, his frequency is somehow similar enough that they're able to give us the power of the Star Force, whatever that means. Being moved by Sonia's goal to become a better person, Geo wakes up and attempts to do the same thing. He finally goes to school. We learn that Mr. Shepard's getting heat from the principal for not following the curriculum, believing instead that developing the students as people is more beneficial to them than just their test results. His inner conflict from having to choose between his students and beliefs or his own children he has to take care of, it does present an opportunity for an Femian named Lyra to slide into his DMs. Mr. Shepard's next class is noticeably more dull, dry, and unengaging. Some new tech called the Study Wave projects knowledge directly into your brain. That's totally safe. Omega tells Geo that it's not safe. We run into Supergoon again, and Geo's paralyzed with doubt due to multiple near-death experiences. Ironically, this does lead to one more near-death. Pegasus reminds us again where the power of the Star Force comes from. Geo wants to protect the people who believe in him, and this is what gives us access to the Star Force. Okay, real quick, the Mega Man games have always been about how versatile Mega Man is. He always gets a new form based off of his opponents or rivals, and sometimes from unexpected sources completely. In the case of the Star Force, Pegasus gives us a massive speed boost, auto lock on all our cards, a charge attack that freezes enemies on impact, and even a finishing move after we counter an enemy. It's widely considered the best of the 3 available in the Star Force games. With this new power, we go straight for Lyra. And I gotta say, his stage is pretty hilarious. You make your way down the path and a pop quiz literally flies at you with a strict time limit to answer the questions. By the time we get to the boss, my brain is deflated, we get a really cool one-liner, we defeat Libra Scales, and we shut down the Study Wave. Even after Shepard's heel turn, his students show concern for him. This support helps Shepard drive out Libra on his own. Shepard gets fired, but his students petition to get him back, and it actually works. Then we get to the conclusion of our play. Geo has to step up and play the lead role of Mega Man, down to the recreated suit. After everything that's happened, Geo's more open to friendships. It's even reflected in his portrait now, look at him. As our crew is wrapping up another normal day of school, Snuggle shows up for the third time with a scheme more devious than the last. Geo's heroic nature kicks in and he takes charge of keeping Luna safe. This is a rare moment where Geo's secret identity does get in the way, like Peter Parker and Spider-Man, Bruce Wayne and Batman, or Miley Cyrus and Hannah Montana. Luna's held hostage and Mega Man is now helpless to save her, which is definitely another near death for her. Before things get darker, Harpnote comes and saves her brother. The two save Luna from this, and this just further sparks Luna's emotions for not just Geo, but Mega Man. When things calm down, Sonia actually reveals that she was there to ask Geo on a date, to which he says yes to. Things are looking up for our boy. Meanwhile, things are looking down for Luna. She overheard her parents talking about taking her out of school and into a boarding school, expeditiously. Knowing she has a limited amount of time left with her friend, but not telling anyone the bad news, she tries to spend time with them, but they're all unavailable, including Geo, who's spending his time with a famous musician. Luna's parents happen to be the ones in charge of the tropical exhibit on the top of the Macy's. No, I'm not kidding. They catch her stalking Geo on his date, and Luna finds herself at her lowest point. Snake Lady senses this and snakes her way into the situation with the unique power to control snakes, and with an entire exhibit full of them, this is the only time that she will be relevant. Why does this alien have the power to control snakes? Are there snakes in space? Why would an alien have the power to control Earth snakes? The situation immediately gives us another near death, but it's notably for Sonia, who jumps in the way to save Geo from a poisonous snake. We have the snakes chill out so that we can pursue Queen Ophiuka. This comp isn't hard, it's actually pretty funny again, just because you basically have to find antidotes at the end of a small path to save the NPCs that unlock the doors, and on your way back from getting the antidote you get chased by giant snakes. The little snakes make a pretty tight pattern in the actual boss fight. They're pretty tricky to avoid, but otherwise the difficulty of the fight isn't too high. After we defeat them, we learn of someone stronger and who's actually in charge, Gemini. This powerful Ephemian destroys Ophiuka in front of us for claiming they were in their way. Luna's thankful for Mega Man, who stopped her from going too far, embraces him as he changes back and discovers he's actually Geo. Her parents chalk up recent events as a bad nightmare, reflecting the metaphor that Luna's being squeezed by depression and despair. Luna will not be transferring. Knowing Geo's secret identity and having a big crush on Mega Man, she does ask Geo to form a brother band with her. Their relationship may be a bit strange, but the two do care about each other genuinely. Luna receives assurance that Geo and Sonia are not dating. Sonia teases Geo into getting her a free sundae, and a grown man got beaten down by a 5th grader. Nice. Geo gets a tip that some bad stuff is going down in the city. When he gets there, it's basically the stand Survivor from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and if you didn't get that, it's basically WrestleMania. Geo handles the goon that was in charge of instigating beef, and we happen to run into the best boy, Pat. I didn't talk about him earlier, but he's one of Geo's classmates. He comes off as extremely kind and friendly and sympathetic towards Geo. Pat confesses to us that he doesn't have any parents and has a place that he considers a safe haven, just like Geo. He takes us to Dream Island, a beautiful man-made island that also has a large disposal site. It's here where we learn Pat's heartbreaking backstory. As a baby, he was abandoned by his parents here and was found by a trash sorting bot. He received his name from the name that was written on the robot, Patrick. On our way out, we almost get trashed ourselves, making this near-death number, 10? Sheesh. Once we shut the robots down, we come face to face with a very important antagonist, Gemini. He's apparently the right-hand man to the FM King, and he's already partnered with a human named Ray. Geo and Pat meet up, and before they go home, Geo asks Pat to form a brother band with him, showing his deep trust in the young man. Pat's never had a brother, and he holds a deep secret himself, so he has to think on it. After a long discussion with himself, he accepts. As the two are about to form a brother band, Pat's secret is violently revealed. He has multiple personality disorder. His other identity turns out to be Ray the whole time. and he was partnered with Gemini. The two come together to become Gemini Spark. Ray's goal seems to be to take revenge on the entire world by helping the FM King destroy it. Now, the gimmicks to the dungeons of the bosses up to now have been silly and inoffensive, but this next one can be pretty rough. You have a radar that gives you a rough sense of where buried objects are, you have to find multiple dudes to progress, you have dozers constantly trying to reset your position to the starting point, all while random encounters are still happening. The Gemini Spark fight is pretty cool. Ray has all the health, and attacking Pat will not count as damage. This means that Pat can jump in the way and absorb hits that would end the fight. Gemini Spark's lust for power ends up being his downfall. The boys have one last conversation, with Pat believing that his condition, it's easy to betray the people he cares about, including himself. Making himself vulnerable ends up causing Geo to regress to his former behavior. Mega believes Geo to be a pathetic host and decides to leave him. Being betrayed by Pat and then abandoned by Mega, he's at his lowest point. When his friends even have an intervention to check up on him, he ends up breaking their brother bands, being afraid to be close to a person again. It really baffles me how this game got an E rating when the themes are so heavy, dark, and relatable. I'm sure we've all had times in our lives where we just don't want to associate with anyone regardless of how much they care about you. Geo's depression translates to self-destructive behavior by closing off the relationships to people that he cares about. In lighter news, the space station Geo's father was on is now headed directly for Earth. Even better than that, the FM King openly declares war and promises to destroy Earth. Geo rushes to save his mother from the area that might be under attack. But without Mega, he's kinda powerless. He then gets beat up by a gang of jammers, making this a brutal near death. He's saved by the legendary Pokemon trio and decides that while he is afraid of loss and betrayal, he cares more about fighting to protect the people he loves than he is being passive to their pain. The real hero of the game, Pitcher Man, one-shots yet another enemy, just in time for us to see the revived FMians attacking Mega and Harpnote and steal the Andromeda key. As Gemini goes for the final strike, Geo jumps in the way and takes the hit. This has to be another near-death experience, and one so quickly after the previous one. The FM King recalls his warriors because their ultimate weapon is now ready. Geo apologizes to Sonia, and she reminds him that even if he severs their brother bands, their hearts are still connected. As Geo apologizes to Luna and the Goof Troop, they get taken hostage, making for one more near-death moment. Geo transforms in front of him, revealing his identity and showing us what incredible things he's been doing in the eyes of a normal person. You gotta remember, he is an 11-year-old kid who's been risking his life against alien monsters while also dealing with his depression. Luna reforms her brother band with him, and Bud is inspired by Geo's bravery and requests to form a brother band with him as well. For Mega Man to go to space, Aaron has to repair the piece of the station that fell prior to the beginning of the game. We get attacked by Gemini, that's another near-death attack, and this time Pat takes the hit so that Geo has time to transform. We get rid of Gemini Spark once and for all, but the repercussions of his actions have not been brought to light just yet. As Geo readies for a journey he may not come back from, he says goodbye to his mother and his friends, and he does promise to return. Anyone that's played a Mega Man game knows that the final area always has that pizzazz, that powerful feeling that things are coming to an end. The last area of Star Force is the space station that disappeared along with Geo's father. Geo being all alone up there and the whole world counting on him definitely fits this description. The doors are locked behind the constellations of enemies we fought, as well as a boss rush. Using my enormous intellect and definitely not cheating, I blew through the puzzles, S-ranked the bosses, and made my way to the final boss. The FM King is no stranger to betrayal, so he isn't surprised that Omega, one of his own warriors, would be the one to step against him. It's also then revealed that Omega was actually an 8-Emian survivor the entire time. That explains why Omega wanted revenge against the FM King and how he lost everything he had when the FM King destroyed Omega's planet. This is what lets him sympathize with Geo this entire time. We have a sick final battle that, in my case, ended pretty poetically, using a card that my chat and I really loved. We learned that the FM King, Cepheus, grew up constantly under threat of betrayal and assassination, meaning he never formed any true bonds. It also turns out that Gemini lied and told Cepheus planet AM was going to attack them, which played into his paranoia and caused them to destroy planet AM. Mega Man having bested him completely showed that he had no ulterior motive when he says he forgives the FM King and would like to complete his father's dream of forming a brother band with Planet FM. With the help of Planet FM, the chance to rebuild Planet AM might be possible. We have one last near-death scenario. Geo escapes pod deviates from its course back on Earth, and he's sent wandering off into space. The power of the brother bands does guide him home, after all, so that Geo can keep his promise. While this is the end of the main game, there are still plenty of things that I didn't talk about that I'd much rather you guys all experience for yourselves. There's optional bosses, cameo appearances, and more to the story that I didn't cover here. This is a series that came into my life when I needed it the most, and I gotta say, Geo's journey of self-growth was inspiring to me. On release, the reception of the game was pretty average, but the Battle Network burnout was still pretty fresh at the time. Having more than a decade of time since the last game in the series, these games hold up really well. Playing through Star Force was a wonderful experience that I'm glad I get to share with you all. This is truly a game that deserves a spotlight, so I'm happy to provide it. If you got feedback as I'm growing. If the reception to this video isn't so great, then I'll take the hint. My Twitch is linked down below, so you guys should be able to find me pretty easily. Come on by and say hey. Who knows, you might catch me playing a sequel to a beloved game if you do. Thank you all for watching, sincerely.